guys, it's War Dude, and we're back with another Let's Read from the subreddit r/NoSleep. This one's called Have You Ever Wanted to Change Your Reflection? By user Weird Bryce Guy. Sit back, relax, and let's see what this story is all about. I wasn't happy with my reflection, not necessarily with how I looked, but with how my face was reflected in mirrors. So being a person of action, I figured, why not do something about it? Looking online, I mostly found tutorials on how to present yourself at your best angle, and other less effective methods. And, of course, the many suggestions to simply change your face using the application of makeup to highlight and accentuate and enhance. None of it was what I was looking for, so I eventually branched off from those particular search parameters and looked into occult methods of reflection transformation. Imagine projection through thought was one method I found that piqued my interest, and after a few hours of reading through ritual tutorials on strangely dated websites and the dubious blog posts of people who allegedly accomplished such a feat, I decided to try my hand at it. The initial efforts were unsurprisingly unsuccessful. I could have envisioned how I wanted to look, but for whatever reason, I couldn't project that image onto the mirror itself. My regular, unsatisfactory reflection persisted. So I looked further, delved deeper into strange occult lore, sifted through the obviously fake bullshit, until I found some my passion for reading, something I'd been obsessed with since early childhood. I figured that my knowledge of books would greatly benefit the mirror me, who probably wouldn't have much to do in the mirror realm. I knew I could spend hours thinking about the plots of my favorite novels. The actual transference of the passion was weird, and now that I've given it up, I don't quite have the vocabulary to describe it. To get an idea, imagine being really excited for an event, but upon arriving, you see someone you hate, or realize it isn't what you thought it would be. Any reason for the sudden loss of that anticipation and excitement? That's kind of what it was like. One moment, I was a guy who loved to read. The next, the idea of reading was something I could probably tolerate, but not for any significant length of time or with any depth of interest. With my eyes still closed, I moved on to the next and final phase, spiritual synthesis. I had created a thing and given it life, but it wasn't yet me. I still needed to be tethered to my spirit so that I would see it wherever I went, in any reflective source I would happen to come across, not just my bathroom mirror. For this, I had to touch it. I had to physically bond with it within the mirror realm. Despite the surrealness of this part, it's a bit easier to explain. It was also a bit simpler to accomplish. Reaching up, eyes still closed, I put my hand on the mirror and waited. The instructions had said to wait for the reciprocation of contact, so I did, both anticipating and dreading the moment. After a few moments of my fingers pressing lightly against the cold glass, I felt contact from the other side. There was a warmth and a buzzing tactile feedback, and then I let go. In the instructions, there had been significant importance placed on the separation of contact after the initial event. Something about becoming too attached to yourself, but not in the right way. With that, the ritual was complete. I opened my eyes, saw myself standing there, naked, with his hands at his sides, just like me. I reached for the light, saw him do the same, and turned it on. I performed a few gestures and expressions, and my reflection repeated them all without delay. My face was just how I had imagined, how I wanted it to be. There was no indication that this new reflection was actually alive. face was contorted into an awful, almost demonic scowl, the skin taut with rage, the eyes piercing and full of a deep, nearly inhuman malice. I put the controller down and ran to the bathroom, heart beating chaotically as my mind replayed that loathsome image. Turning on the bathroom light, I saw it again, that vicious, snarling face, my face, twisted by a seemingly baseless disdain. Shakingly, I made a few movements, and all were reflected, but in the face, hideous and hateful, alone refused to mimic the expressions I made. Finally, some fateful intuition led me to stop my absurd gestures and speak to myself, to the mirror. In a stuttering voice, I asked it, the soul-endowed reflection, why it had been appearing so hateful lately, why it was refusing to calmly, obediently reflect the face I'd given it. For a moment, it remained still, evil-looking, but unmoving, its body breathing in rhythm to my own. Then, in a display of horrific independence, it spoke. And while I myself didn't move, its voice played through my mouth, the sounds carried forth from my lungs. You gave me this love of literature, this knowledge of it, and the capacity for its appreciation, but you starved me from the content. You denied me the sole means of entertainment I could have in this immaterial prison. You've sold the books, abandoned that passion, which is fine for yourself. But what of me? What do I have now? Nothing, just sheer, black, boring nothingness. I have life, but I cannot live. When the auditory puppetry was relieved, and my reflection smell settled back into its cruel snarl, I found myself feeling both extreme terror and deep sympathy. Terror at having been briefly, albeit partially, taken control of, and sympathy for my reflection's plight, for which I was technically responsible. In that moment, I wanted to help him, but I'd already sold the books, and had already used the money to buy the console. And while it had exerted brief control over my voice, my reflection was still trapped within the mirror. standing